right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Mandy, and this is Alex. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking to you about teenagers and mental health topics related to depression, anxiety, topics of self-harm, things that we don't often talk about sometimes in public and in a group. And that's very important for us to know as parents or support persons in the community. If you're a teacher, if you're a grandparent, if you have any ability to support any young person, we want to be able to equip you and give you some information to help you kind of start the discussion, talk about this with your teens, because teens are talking about it amongst each other, and they're hearing about it on social media, and they're hearing about it in the media. And so we want parents to be able to talk to our kids the same. We're going to go ahead and get started. And feel free to ask if you need clarification as I'm going, feel free to just stick your hand up and ask me. That's fine. We're a small enough group that we can do that. So we're talking about how to start the conversation with a teenager. When these kids are getting a little bit older, middle school, high school, they're talking about all kinds of stuff that may be unfamiliar to us. And so how do we start the conversation? How do we talk to our kids so that they see us as an authority figure? They see us as kind of an expert in the field, that they want to come to us to talk to us, because when you're that age, they think mom and dad don't know anything, or adults in my life don't know what they're talking about. So they're not always inclined to come talk to a parent or adult. So we want to be a trusted adult that they feel comfortable to talk to us, and they feel like we have the knowledge and the experience to be able to give them credible information. Yeah.
And there's another way, like, authority figure, I feel like, has been very negative to these kids, or more hesitant to go authoritarian.
Yeah. Yes.
What's another way of going about maybe like coaching parent as opposed to like maybe authority?
Well, so when I say authority, what I really mean by that is anybody that's got like a position of power in someone's life, a position of credibility. So that could be a coach, a teacher, somebody who provides, like you said, support, somebody who offers support in the community, somebody that has some influence in a teen's life. So when you start a conversation, or if it comes up in conversation, what is important is to ask questions. A lot of times, if a kid comes to you and says, hey, what do you think about this? Or I've been thinking about this, or I heard so-and-so say this. A lot of times we are very tempted to just give information and just pour out information to them. What's important is for us to ask some questions. Stay curious. Stay curious about any topic you're talking about with your teen, but particularly mental health conversations. Stay curious, stay open-minded, ask questions. Well, what do you think about that? Where did you hear that? What does that mean to you? What do you think that means? Tell me more about that kind of stuff. Start the conversation, start the dialogue. Don't just start pouring information onto your kids. You're going to lose them very quickly. Another thing you want to do is present yourself as available, knowledgeable, and emotionally capable. The last thing you want to do is freak out. If your child says something like that sounds a little intense for you, like, oh, so-and-so committed suicide last week at school, and or so-and-so, whatever, something bad happened, or so-and-so asked me what this meant, and they say a word that you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know that my 13-year-old even knew what that was at this point. We don't want to freak out. You want to freak out on the inside if you want, stay calm on the outside, present as knowledgeable. You don't want the kid to think, oh gosh, I can't come to this person, because they're going to freak out. They don't know what I'm talking about. Roll their eyes, this person doesn't know anything. So stay calm, ask some questions. Oh yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Okay, well tell me some more about that. You want to present yourself as knowledgeable. Let's say you don't know what they're talking about and you're not knowledgeable about it. That's okay. You say, you know what? That's a great question. I'm going to get that answer for you. So you want them to think that you're the expert on the topic. You know more than they do, that they can come to you. You want to avoid judgment, black and white thinking, or imposing your values right away. So what I mean by black and white thinking is all or nothing. This is good, this is bad. Using value statements, using value judgments. Don't say that word. I can't believe you just said that word to me. Avoid things like that. Even if they used a word that you didn't like. Maybe it's not a word that you use in your home. It's okay. The content and the question is more important than how they asked it. And so you can go back and revisit a word that they said that maybe you don't want them to say. But in the meantime, instead of imposing the values right away, or hey, we don't say that in this house, or I can't believe you just used that word, or where did you even see that? What are you watching that you saw that? Avoid those value judgment statements. Avoid that punitive language when you're talking to your teenager. Instead, engage in the conversation, ask some questions, and then later on, if you want to go back and address where they saw it or what were they watching or what kind of curse word they used when they explained it to you, that can be addressed. But don't start out that way because you're going to shut them down pretty much right away at that point. You want to listen more than you speak. You don't want to talk at them. You don't want to lecture them. You don't want to, again, impose the values. As parents, it's our job to teach our kids character, and it's our job to teach our kids values. But instead of imposing those values right away, hold back and try to, they're old enough as a teenager to kind of pull those values out. Pull that out of them and say, what do you think about that? How does that make you feel? What do you think? Is that okay to do? What do you think about why is it okay or why is it not okay? Let them start thinking for themselves and kind of come up with their own values, and then you can share your opinion. But if they feel heard first, if they feel like you listened to them and you heard them first, then they're much likely to listen to you after the fact. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable and transparent. I think as parents, sometimes this is really hard for us. By the way, I have 3 kids. My oldest is 23. He's on the autism spectrum. He has struggled with depression, anxiety, and self-harm attempts. And it was a really difficult time for us in our home as a family. This was 5 or 6, 7 years ago. He's very stable and doing great and thriving now as a 23-year-old. I also have a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old. So, we're in this process. So I can relate. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. What we don't want to present to our kids is that we've got it all together. We're perfect. We know what we're talking about, and they're the only ones that struggle. Because that's how I felt when I was a teenager. Mom's not going to understand because she's never been through this. I think it's okay, age appropriate, to tell your kids about some of your own struggles, to share with them that maybe you've had some depressive symptoms, that you've had social anxiety or general anxiety, that you've had thoughts of self-harm, whatever it is. I think it's okay to share with them and to be vulnerable so that you can build an inroad with them, build some rapport, build some camaraderie, and then they realize, okay, she does understand. She's not way up here and I'm way down here. Create an inroad. Be relatable to them. Keep up with what they're watching and what they're listening to. This is a big one. There's a huge gap right now between like this whole Gen Z generation and those of us who are in our late 40s like me, that they speak a whole different language than we speak. And sometimes I'm like, what did you just say? And what does that mean? And can you use that word again? So I just start Googling stuff and I start watching the YouTubes that they're watching and watching the influencers that they're watching and being on social media that they're on, paying attention to what they're seeing and hearing and listening to so that I can be relatable. If they say something to me, I'm not spending the whole time saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
So, and I also see this like little ones from my experience as a teenager. How do you get kids not wanting to take it out on themselves for things? Because I feel like when something goes wrong, they take it out on themselves, and it gets to the point when they're older, it gets, like you said, more serious.
Yes. So being able to create an outlet or provide an outlet, and we're actually going to talk about that a little bit in a few minutes when we hand it over to Alex. She's going to talk about resources and things like that. So that's a great question. We definitely will get there. So definitely keep up with what they're listening to, what they're watching, what kind of language they're using, so that you can have that discussion with them on their level. So again, monitor their online activity. This means, and I'm not talking about for punitive, that's a whole different conversation. I'm talking more about so that you can understand, so that you can learn, so that you can know what it is that they're talking about. If you're watching a TV show or a movie, or you walk through the living room and you see something on their, iPad that they're looking at and it catches your ear, just stop and ask a question about it. Like, what did that person say? Who is that? What do you think about that? That kind of stuff, creating inroads, creating that conversation moment. Pay attention for signs of depression in your kids, for any changes that they might be experiencing. So maybe they have some drama with their friends at school. They're not talking to so-and-so anymore, but they used to. Or they don't want to go to the football games anymore. They don't want to go to some of the social events that they were going to. Now they just kind of hang around at home. They want to be alone. They're staying in bed more often. Pay attention to those shifts in their social environment, in their friends, any kind of drama, any kind of bullying, any kind of, I don't want to go to school today, avoidant behavior. I don't want to school. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school once a week, once every couple of weeks, and that's unusual for them. Or even if it's I don't like my teacher. I don't like this teacher. I don't want to go to this class, or I don't like this friend anymore. Any kind of shifts in their social engagements, any grades that are declining, and maybe that's not normal for them. Those kinds of things are just little warning signs, may not be anything big. As teenagers, there's ups and downs, and we shift, and there's hormones, and there's all kinds of social pressures. So those little shifts are not necessarily a bad sign, but pay attention. Keep them in mind, pay attention, start the conversation. And I'm going to hand it over to Alex, and she's going to talk about a few other things, and we'll do some questions and answers at the end. And like I said, after lunch or during lunch, if you wanted to ask any more questions, we're available for that. We don't want to keep you late for lunch.
Okay, so the back half of this lecture might be a little bit heavier. We're going to be talking about signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, and suicidality, self-harm in teens. That word might come up a few times. I just want to preface that, just to make sure everyone's comfortable and okay with that before I move forward. Here are some statistics about mental health in general, especially applying to adolescents. So globally, 1 in 7 teens will experience a mental health disorder. This number is actually underreported because there's a lot of people in the world that do not have access to mental health care. 40% of teens have experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in the last year, and about a fifth of US adolescents have experienced either depression or anxiety symptoms. 22% of teens have considered committing suicide. This number actually goes up for certain populations, such as like the LGBTQ plus community, jumps up to about 42%, something to just kind of stay aware of. With all of this being said, mental health is really prevalent, especially among our youth. So a lot of questions about how do we support the generations that are coming after us. Some risk for mental health concerns. Of course, there's like genetic predispositions, environmental factors, and things like that. But there's also adverse childhood experiences such as trauma, poverty, discrimination, family history of mental health. You've got the social and digital environment, so peer influence and rejection, loss of friendships, bullying, low self-esteem and self-efficacy. Studies have shown that a higher self-esteem can actually decrease the likelihood of dealing with mental health symptoms, and early substance use. Caveat to this is just because one of these things is present in your child's life, it does not necessarily mean that they will develop a mental health disorder later. It just is an increased risk. So part of our presentation is geared towards cell phones in the digital age. It's really, really important that we develop awareness because all you hear about is social media, technology, AI. Some pros to technology, of course, is you actually do have increased connectivity. So access to family and friends, access to information. However, we have seen increased negative effects of technology use as well, such as increased self-esteem and body image issues, the risk of cyber hate or cyberbullying, exposure to illegal or psychologically maladaptive behavior. These are all things that can contribute to negative mental health side effects. Yeah.
With the cell phones and the digital age, a lot of young people want to like game, and they're like, "Oh, well, I play with my friends online," and I have some parents say, "Well, I've never met their friends. I don't know who they're talking to," and there's now an over reliance on the digital connection versus the person-to-person kind of connection. I'm wondering if you see that as a negative thing or social connection is social connection in whatever form that it comes.
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I think honestly, it absolutely could be both, right? If your child feels like maybe they don't have those in-person connections at school per se, they feel isolated and rejected, perhaps. Sometimes they can find community in social connections. Again, the caveat with that is there are a lot of unregulated sites, chat sites, things like that, forums out there. So there is the chance that they could be in contact with somebody that they do not know, you've never met personally. This slide actually will talk a little bit about how you can respond and how you can look into what your child is doing technology-wise.
Can I just piggyback just quickly
Yeah.
on that one too? Because
Yeah.
I love that question and I love your answer, that it absolutely is situational. That earlier I told you I had a son who is 23 who's on the autism spectrum. So he's got a lot of social anxiety and he has struggles making friends in a conventional setting. So most of his friends are online friends. Some of them, he told me, when he was 16 years old, his best friend lives in Australia. And I was like, wow, okay. He's never met this best friend in Australia. But most of his social connections were online. And for him, that was all he had the capacity to do at that time. Since then, we've taught him and he's learned and he's built skills to be more conventional and making friends in person. But at the time, I wasn't as strict with him in making some of those online connections because that was his social interaction. Whereas my neurotypical conventional 12-year-old is social butterfly and doesn't have any friends online. So I think it's very situational, just like you said. I think what's important is their teachable moments. When he told me his best friend lives in Australia, we talked about what is a friend? What's friendship? What does that mean to you? And we kind of create it more as a teachable moment and talking about relationships and friendships and fostering, why do you think it is that most of your friends you've not met? And so starting that conversation again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this is actually from the APA, the American Psychological Association. Because of the increased use of technology and social media, there's been a lot of research poured into this. They do recommend that in early adolescence, so ages 10 to 14, there is a higher level of adult monitoring of what's going on. And by monitoring, they do not mean, sneak your child's phone away every night and root through every single one of their apps. What they mean by monitoring is having that ongoing discussion and looking at the context, the content, teaching them those digital literacy skills. As they grow older and they age, they mature, they develop those digital literacy skills, like Mandy was talking about, oftentimes they can have increased freedom and independence. However, parents should always be aware of problematic screen dependence. That looks like anything that impairs your child's ability to function in their daily activities, their roles, their responsibilities. Is their sleep being impacted? Are they still being physically active? Things like that. If you see some of those alarm flags going off, it could be connected to the phone. As I kind of said earlier, monitoring should be balanced with appropriate needs for privacy. Not saying to invade your child's space in their phone, but sometimes monitoring is important because there is the chance that there's some either illegal or maladaptive, psychologically maladaptive things going on. So it's just things to be aware of, right? Now we're going to go into like the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety. Of course, there's persistent sadness, low mood, crying spells, excessive fears and worries. Sometimes you can see mood changes, especially in children and adolescents. Anger, irritability, hostility, sometimes even a sudden peace. If you notice your child's feeling really low and all of a sudden they're happy and peaceful, that is actually a warning sign. Feelings of hopelessness, withdrawal and isolation, changes in eating or sleeping, or an increase of risky behaviors are all things to look out for. Especially giving away prized possessions, talking about, writing about, drawing, or even posting on social media about wanting to die or suicide. All of these things indicate that there's something deeper going on and it should be addressed with your child. So here's a little bit of the heavier stuff. Again, this is where I might use words like suicide. Wanted to talk about the difference between thoughts and intent. When you're having a conversation with your teen and something comes up and they have these thoughts, it's really, really scary. And I would imagine part of you would want to know, like, does that mean they might hurt themselves? Are they planning to do something? So knowing the difference can help ease some nerves around this topic. Thoughts are exactly how they're explained. Thoughts. They can be fleeting, they can be persistent, oftentimes less detailed, such as, maybe I would be better off dead. Other times it could be a little bit more detailed. People might think of, what would life be like if I wasn't here? Things like that. The thing with thoughts, it's also referred to as passive ideation. Thoughts and passive ideation does not necessarily mean somebody has intentions to hurt themselves, but it still is something that shouldn't be taken lightly or ignored. It does still require help. Intent, on the other hand, is more of an active ideation. This refers to a clear desire and plan, whether that plan is partially or fully complete, to go through with the act of completing suicide. This is often, it may or may not be accompanied by specific steps such as the giving away possessions, saying goodbyes, or obtaining means of how they might go through with that act. Intent or active ideation is considered an urgent emergency and does require immediate intervention. So again, kind of going into the importance of seeking help, early intervention we think is always better. It does lead to better recovery outcomes. We'll go into a few resources that we have regarding teens and mental health in general. Some of these resources may have been mentioned in earlier lectures, but the 988 Suicide and Crisis Hotline, it's available 24/7, 365 days a year, text, call, online chat options. If your teen feels like they need to talk to somebody, don't know who they want to go to, this is a great option. Counseling and therapy providers like us here at JCAC, there's lots of other wonderful providers in the area, but if your child is experiencing any of those signs or symptoms, it's best if they talk to a professional. If it is an emergency and there's active ideation going on that you pick up on, 911, your local emergency services is always the way to go. And then you also have the inpatient and outpatient programs. So this last slide, I want to present a little bit of a scenario. So say you're having a conversation with your teen about mental health, and they disclose to you, you know, mom or dad, I actually have had thoughts about hurting myself. And you talk to them a little bit, and you know, they disclose, you know, no, I've never actually thought about how I might do that. I don't really want to do that. I just feel really sad all the time. What can you do, right? Because I imagine that's a really, really scary place for a parent to be in. This is one thing that we actually use within our counseling rooms a lot, and they're called safety plans. You can walk through with this with your child, and it's kind of into 4 different categories here. 1, support network. Who can they call? Who do they trust to help if they're feeling really low or if their thoughts are getting really dark? Get the names, get the numbers, write them down, have them accessible. Protective factors. Talk to your kid about what are some reasons that's worth living, right? What are their coping skills? Who are their support people? Is there anything that they're looking forward to? Talk about that. Healthy coping skills. Again, this can look different for everybody. Everybody has their own unique personality, but it could look like deep breathing, mindfulness, meditation, exercise. Something as small as getting a snack can sometimes be helpful, as well as creating a safe environment. So this is more on the parent side, but removing or locking away anything that might be lethal in the house for the time being. The goal of this is to keep your child safe for now, right? So this is kind of like a first intervention before they can go on to receive professional help. Yes? Yeah.
What she enjoyed and loved and made her happy.
Yeah.
Maybe having something that for family members that
Mhm.
will sort of, okay, this will bring, you know, this parent joy, this child joy, this sibling joy, so that the parent will know, okay, maybe I should do this kind of event for the kids to feel that fulfillment or love language. Oh, this is the love language of this daughter. She feels the love when she's hugged.
Yeah.
I feel like that also links to that where it's a preventive measure before it gets to that. Because
Absolutely.
when you don't have it and you don't feel fulfilled, that's when I feel like it will cause that. So maybe having those things that say, hey, did you feel fulfilled with this joy? Is there something lacking that you
Yeah, yeah. I love that idea. Having like that, you said like a joy board, looking at things that you love, you enjoy, making sure you're still engaging in those enjoyable hobbies and things like that. Finding that sense of purpose and fulfillment, as well as, I mean, even gratitude journaling is another thing that comes up a lot, right? So I think that's great. And again, with coping skills and kind of those preventative measures, there are an abundant amount of things that you can either think of or you can find online. So there's many different things. It's really what it comes down to is what works best for your child. How do they feel happy? How do they feel self-confident and things like that?
Thank you so much, because that I think we get lost in life.
Yeah.
All we have to do, homework, school, work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we get so sucked into helping others, like our employer, to making sure the teachers are happy, that we forget about ourselves.
Yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of stress and pressure, especially for our youth, and I think that's part of the reason why we want to put this on and give resources to people. Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of wrapping up the end of our lecture. Like Mandy said earlier, we'll do some Q&A. If you have any questions, you can feel free to meet up here with one of us, and then we also are doing the raffles, the last two. So, all right, thank you, everyone.